starting point for them.
Yeah.
You can keep covering your kids' eyes, asshole.
I don't.
Honestly, can we really dismiss the idea of the parent? I know it's like uncomfortable for many people, but isn't that the problem though, is the fact that the child is vulnerable to the whims of the parent, and the fact that in this country, government has decided that children don't have rights. Doesn't that make that control of the parent all the more odious, that they would override the child's right to knowledge over the parent's right to feel better because their child doesn't know what sex is?
Absolutely, but let me ask a question. What's the alternative then? Who is to have control over that child? Who is going to decide what information is worthy and not? Because there is always going to be opportunity costs. If I present this kind of information, I'm not presenting other kind of information. I present it in this way, I'm not going to be presenting it another way. So I agree with you, like that there's the potential in that relationship is one of power and vulnerability, and whenever there's relations of power and vulnerability, there's a great potential for abuse.
And don't forget, your parents are always growing with you. It's been amazing as I've gotten older to watch my parents grow up. You know, my parents went from covering my eyes when I was 12 years old to, by the time I was 18, my dad's standing in the men's department at the men's section of a department store asking me if I wear boxers or briefs. You know, and my mom is turned everything into revisionist history, and she's like, oh yes, I remember back when I figured out Liz was gay, far before she knew, and I helped her come out. She'd actually asked me to leave town, but she doesn't remember that. Hi, Mom. So I guess what I'm saying is being a parent is very hard. And I guess we have to allow for that complexity for individuals. And not so much, I think, for big state systems. We can put the pressure on them.
And I think there's eventually going to be a line that we could draw where someone has been so abusive to a child where we do think there's kinds of intervention, and maybe that line is not even drawn high enough yet, or whether the bar is not high enough yet. But to me, that's a different question than saying whether a parent has a kind of, almost an obligation in some way to sometimes cover eyes. You know, maybe it's because I just saw a car accident, there's lots of people, there's blood to cover the eyes. Should I not do that? Should I say, look at the vulnerability of humanity? Like, what did you say? Where do you draw the line?
You're a sick man.
So you're saying how parents have the right to, maybe censor some of the things that their kids see, but kids don't spend time with their parents.
Right,
You're
absolutely.
crazy. They're at school, or they're on the internet, or they're playing video games or watching TV, and those are the things that may or may not be censored enough for kids. And the state of Texas a couple years ago opted to make one standard history text for a specific grade of the Texas school system, and it left out all of these accomplishments and achievements of minority people, and that is what we were saying before.
And inconvenient little historical events that don't shed well.
Which, by the way, will get adopted by most of the states in the union because they all buy their books from Texas. Yeah.
I could go on a rant about that. With the omission, just as an example, with abstinence-only education, I feel like this causes more social problems than it solves, and then we have more social stigmas to continue putting people that had no information to begin with in situations that are even worse. And I don't think it should be the right of religious beliefs to dictate everything that's going in. And it's despite studies, despite statistics, we're not giving kids information that could help them in the long run because we're too scared. It makes us uncomfortable, and it's our society's ironic uneasiness with sexuality, yet it's posted everywhere at the same time. So I feel like we're like this young teenager of a country and a world where we have no idea what we're doing at all, and like we don't know if we want it or we don't. And because of this, I think the next generations, younger generations, and maybe I'm talking just because I deal with teenagers on a daily basis, it's just frustrating because that omission of information is leading to worse problems that are still not being fixed for, again, somebody else's views taking a turn on what they believe. So it's just kind of this ridiculous, repetitive cycle.
But can I read? I'm going to keep pushing my framing of this because I think we're drawing lines between like what is to be censored and what isn't. Because I agree with you. I think that abstinence-only education seems to be motivated by other things. It looks like it's not helpful, so it looks like for public policy reasons, maybe we should not give in to that, right? Even though there's a political discourse around that, and I guess there's a process that we have to respect. Some maybe, if you want to respect the process, I don't know. But note, if we say okay, so that we're not going to have abstinence-only sex education for children, when do we start introducing things, and what do we start to introduce? We're still going to draw lines. We're still going to say that there's a certain point at which, oh, they're too young to hear that part, or that's something that we don't want to include. And it may be something about diverse sexualities that we don't want to include, and we might want to, just because you brought it up as a topic. And we might point to that and say, well, look, that's another version of this is another form of oppression, and we say we have to push it further. They need to be exposed to this. But there's going to be another point where we say, but don't push it past this, because that's too much.
Well, I would take it even a step further and say, what about those people who sometimes when you speak, you're actually giving information, you're censoring by giving information, right? So if you don't want your kids to know something, if you're, as a kid, you have decided, hey, this is information I don't want to have, right? These are activities I don't want to engage in. And you are subjected to that information. Once you're given that information, there's no going back. You can't suddenly just erase the information, it's there, right? So that, in a way, is censorship. Censorship from, they might call it purity, I could call it lack of knowledge, living the kind of life that you want to live. Do I have the right to impose my worldview or my knowledge base on somebody else? Isn't that, in a way, a form of reverse censorship? Maybe I just made that up.
Yeah, I thought what you just commented was interesting, and that what you also said about drawing a line. And I was thinking the word monoculture came to mind. I'm from like a physics, computer science, engineering background. That's what I study. And what it is if you have multiple kinds of security and they're all the same, then, well, if you tap into one kind of security, then the whole thing goes down. I applied that to censorship in the way that, well, you have this large grading of people who accept certain things and some people don't accept certain things. Well, why are we trying to draw a line in the first place? If we have different people who have different moral standards, then why not just not?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes for a safer society as well.
It makes for a more interesting one.
Yeah. And it goes back to those audience interests, right? That actually, in order for me to be able to live a good life, I have to know the different kind of lives that there are to live. And I'm getting robbed of a choice if that choice is it's somehow structurally kept away from me, right? I'm just being robbed from it.
None of us can agree on what's a good life anyway, so why try to define what it is?
Well, you're going to have to define it for yourself.
Well, for yourself, but I'm saying for them.
But when you define it for yourself, how are you going to pull it out of thin air? Or like you're going to be interacting with other people. So
it's a relational definition.
Yeah, there's almost a way in which you need to have other people expressing their own views for you to even be able to have your own view. Your own view is situated amongst others. You know?
Yeah.
So.
I was just going to say that when they were talking about that it made me think that religion seems to be like the biggest censorship that there is in certain communities. Like, I mean, look at the Amish. You know, they live in a whole community and don't know anything that's going on around the outside world pretty much. They all rely on each other and what they read in the Bible. And it's the same almost, so to speak, I guess, with, I think it's the Quran. I don't know that much about it, but I know.
Actually, you'd be quite surprised to know how enlightened the those who follow the Quran are. Those who actually follow it. So,
But there's always, there does seem to be, often tied to religious communities, a desire to prevent people from being exposed to that which is evil, right? Or that which is outside of the values of that good life that's being presented.
contaminations.
Yeah, it's a kind of contamination. But I'm going to I want to hold my line here and suggest we're all always going to do that. Even if I want to say, look, I like a pluralism. I really like, notice what I just said I don't like. What don't I like? Monoculture. Monoculture's bad.
And if you're somebody who says, you know, I don't trust religion, you're going to hold on to your non-religious or your secular, your atheist position, and you're going to start getting anxious about religious people. You're going to start pushing back against them.
So I think the issue of censorship, and why I like what you said before, is that censorship is always going to be a threat, because as soon as I believe something, that means that there's going to be something that I also now think is a threat to the very thing that I believe and hold true and hold as good. You know? And if what I hold as good is letting everyone do what they want to do, then I'm going to find people who stand for their absolute moral values as being really counterproductive to our society. God, I wish they would just let the rest of us be, you know? And I'm going to try to find out how to hedge them back and keep them quiet.
Censor them.
And censor them in some way. But I just want the word censor to not be a dirty word. There are plenty of examples of it that are wrong and immoral, but it's not a dirty word. We shouldn't censor that word.
I actually lost my thought as I was bringing more information into my head.
I'm sorry, I just silenced you.
There's so much knowledge.
It's okay, it'll be all on YouTube.
I want to say two things. The first thing is when you said like reverse censorship or something, and then when you said, is it censorship when you don't want to know something but somebody like tells you something anyway? Example would be if your parents are swingers, right? You're a little kid, you see all these people come to the house, you don't know who they are, and you don't know why, you know, stuff like that. So your parents tell the kid what's going on at their swingers and stuff. Would that be
Too much information to you?
I mean, not saying you're like a tiny kid.
Oh, okay.
But I'm saying like you're a teenager and you don't know why mom and dad are acting funny with different people. And they tell you they're swingers and you say, I will never ever do that. They're not telling you to do it, and you're not forced to do it. So it's just a little more knowledge than you had before. So it's not really, I don't think that's censorship.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, in your story, did you say that your parents told you that you were the only one in the world that was like that?
No, I just deduced that being the only one I'd ever seen or heard of. Or,
Okay.
well, I mean, yeah, they told me that all little girls like little boys and wore dresses.
Okay. I think in regards to like who tell like a parent how to like raise a child and stuff like that, because that was a question earlier. I think everybody knows that when you have a kid, it's your job to nurture them, make sure they feel safe, make sure that they feel like they can be the best person that they could be. So, say in your story that you said your mom told you you're the only one in the world like this, and that she shields you from seeing gay people holding hands, then, I mean, she's censoring you for one, and two, she lied to you about you being the only one in the world, and that she's, you know, keep trying to uphold that lie by censoring you to seeing it.
She was also protecting me from a world of social ostracization and what she truly believed was a world of not eternal damnation, because Mormons don't believe in that, but you know, she was trying to save my soul and trying to save me from being ostracized from my community and a life of sadness, and she was trying to save me.
I understand that and everything.
It's tough, right?
It's-
And that's the thing, is that we look at these issues of not just censorship, but what we do when we confront these tough issues of censorship. And we want to have really hardline answers, and there aren't any. You know, I look back at my mom on that, and I think, gosh, that gut reaction she had was dumb, but I may have had the same one. You know.
Well, I was thinking about like the drawing a line and stuff, and with kids, and like, I don't know if this is, I mean, I kind of think it's censorship, but like with the movie ratings and stuff, like a little kid can't go see an R-rated movie. Like, you're not going to go let a kid like watch a movie about sex and alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. And then also, like, even when you're older and like you can watch an R-rated movie, you're not going to go like watch it with your parents, because you don't like.
Creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy, and it's like your parents don't want to like see that loss of innocence in you, and like they're always gonna, like, you're always gonna be like their little girl or little, like boy. So like I feel like that's not like bad censorship. It's just kind of like they're trying to like preserve like a child's innocence for as long as they can.
Self-censorship.
Yeah.
The question ends up, I think, and this is something that Matt was trying to get us to think about at the beginning, is, are we talking about self-censorship, social censorship, state-sponsored censorship? What kind of censorship are we talking about? Are we talking about censorship of speech? Are we talking about, you know, I was thinking artistic censorship. When I think about, you know, the social activism that I'm interested in, and what a number of you have told about used to really annoy me, the call and response technique used often now by activist groups, the mic check, where they'll say something and they repeat it back. Really annoying at first, but it's a powerful tool of communication that also can function to censor out things, to let people know you disapprove of something they're saying. You know, it can be a very effective form of group censorship in a good way and potentially a bad way.
Mike, are you pointing?
Oh, I was pointing at
There's exactly a point of that. The other day, a friend posted on Facebook a link to a video of a gay couple who just started making out at one of Ruchti and Dr. speeches, and then all of a sudden they started chanting USA, USA as they were leaving, just to prove a point, like, this is what Ruchti and Dr. stands for, and like they're blocking out what they just saw, pretending that it never existed.
Yes.
And then they're going back to hearing what he has to say.
some sort of like, it was actually lots of jokes about how it was somehow drowning out in their minds the sight of these two men. And by the way, they both look kind of straight, which I thought was even more beautiful, that these guys, what if these guys were both straight? They're just like, dude, let's make out. It's so fucking funny. But it's like, USA, USA. It's like, you just won a hockey match? I have no idea. Yeah, it's beautiful. And the way they failed to censor these guys, it was brilliant. So, yeah.
Out of context, it actually sounds, it's a great thing. It is USA because they were able to,
They
were able
could
to
have been
express
cheering,
themselves.
right? You know,
Right?
totally hot. Yeah.
This might not have been their intention, but it works.
What's really cool to me is how we went from censoring speech to bodies. Like, we went from censoring what we're allowed to say, what we're allowed to show, to acts that we're allowed to do with our bodies, like making out in front of the crowd.
When he stuck his tongue out at me, I was
Like that's to me kind of interesting how that censorship isn't just limited to speech.
I'm just to tag on that too. I'm happy that we went in this direction because I actually thought we were going to sit here and talk about free speech and the Constitution, and I'm so glad we didn't. I'm glad that we started talking.
sorry,
about
polypsychics.
I mean, it's a good thing to have. I'm not saying it's an unimportant discussion. It's a very important discussion.
Very important.
But to even talk about it on that level, why we would be worried about state censorship, right? Why we had to first understand what we're really talking about. What is freedom of expression about? Why is that expression important? And it's going to go right down to things that are very personal. It's going to be very lived, bodily. It's going to be about the different views of how I can live. So that's what we really are concerned about, which is why we don't want the government restricting us, right?
Well, how he brought up body image, I take marketing and advertising and promotion, at my school, and there was an article that I read in the book about how there was a big controversy when Lane Bryant put out their commercial for lingerie, and parents complained that it was too revealing when it's almost just the same exact thing as Victoria's Secret. It's just bigger girls doing their thing, and it was off the air within a day.
One of the arguments was that it wasn't the sexual nature of it, but that it was not the kind of bodies they wanted their kids seeing. And so they weren't censoring sexuality there, they were censoring wrong body image.
The one thing that I keep on just going back in my mind is the fact that no matter what you censor, no matter what you try to take away or to omit or any of that sort, the point is, if the society or if the person has the drive and the need for knowledge, they're going to find that information. They're either going to run into it, they're going to search for it. No matter the point, you shield your kids' eyes from a car accident, but they're going to go home, play Modern Warfare, and see blood and guts everywhere. Eventually. And censoring sex, they could go on the internet and type in any porn site. You don't even have to type in a porn site. Exactly.
And just look at your computer.
and censoring boobies and stuff like that.
You guys like that word.
It's fun. There are people that like boobs, and there are people that like legs, or even arms, or stomachs, abs, and stuff like that. You can see a magazine that shows.
I have to live with you, so that's a little weird. No.
This is going down on.
Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody.
But it's kind of the first part he said. I've noticed, like, I'm not saying like my school took a huge stance against bullying, and like that's a great thing and everything. But I feel like parents, not just school, are insulating their kids. So like, I'm not saying like now we have a bunch of bubble children like walking around who don't know what the world is, but I kind of saw that. I had a couple of friends who didn't know like certain things about the reality of the world. Like, yes, he's hurt really bad and he probably needs to go to a hospital. Like, that's what it looks like. And I'm kind of more worried that if as parents become more protective and that there's a sign that parents are becoming more protective, that like people aren't going to know how to cope with situations in the future. Like when you're bullied, yes, you should reprimand the bully, but it's more like, shouldn't you help the person who was bullied before considering that, because they're the one who's hurt. So it's more for me like, if you insulate someone from every harm in like an institution or something, what happens when they leave that institution and go out into like the business world? It's going to be constant like heckling and stuff like that. They're not going to know what to do with it, and you're an adult now, so it's a much more complex situation.
And this, just by the way, this will have to be our last one. We're getting to that oh so sad time around wrapping this up.
You're stopping this conversation.
I think we're going to these officially end, so people who aren't here because their teacher said, "I'll let you pass this course."
Okay. Well, I think like I know what you're saying is like if you censor someone to a certain point, like eventually they're gonna get that to the like reality of uncensorship and stuff like that, and they may like not know how to cope with it, or like someone who was exposed to like bullying and all of that stuff, like they might either be able to like deal with it more because they're used to it, or they could even go the other way and revert back to like, oh, this is like childhood all over again, and like it could all stack on top of each other, and it could make things worse, even worse.
I guess I was lucky for my upbringing and because of my size, because when anybody tried to bully me, I'd get the fists up and start fighting someone, but I guess that was my coping way of doing it. Like, you ain't gonna mess with me.
Can I have the last word on video? I want to say, there really is no such thing as effective censorship anyway. Nowadays, all you have to do is pull off a really quick flash mob, and you can have a really, really effective protest that no one can shut down before it's over. So anybody tells you there's no way you can effectively pull off a protest, it's done before they finish the sentence. They cannot stop you from expressing what you want to express and stating what you want to state in any way you want to do it.